I've been wanting to get my hands on a PS4 for a long time, and it's undisputable that it has a lot of powerhouse IPs that are exclusive to the console brand. God of War, Uncharted, Killzone, Horizon Zero Dawn, even the newly released Spider-Man. There are so many titles of impeccable quality on the PS4, it's no wonder why it's done so well this console generation. Sony have also remastered or even ported a lot of their old classics, but one game in particular is hailed as not only one of PlayStation's most unique and acclaimed titles, but also, supposedly, one of the absolute best games ever made. A game by the veteran game studio Naughty Dog called The Last of Us. The Last of Us is an iconic game in the pop culture of the gaming medium. Nothing else is really comparable as a complete package, although many elements are familiar. Starting off with the story though, we observe a young girl called Sarah and her father Joel late at night bantering about it being Joel's birthday. After the humble celebration ends, Joel carries Sarah upstairs to bed until later on she wakes up and we have to investigate in her shoes where Joel has gotten to. You get a chance to interact with the world and see what's going on the news channels and even bursts of activity outside. That is until you find Joel covered in blood. Soon after, your neighbour bursts through the house in a rabid frenzy and Joel guns him down. Next, Joel's brother Tommy arrives and drives the two of you into town. As the trio approach, they find cars backed up on the highway and desperate civilians running from infected husks until a car hits their vehicle. Controlling Joel now, we carry Sarah through the streets filled with the screams of terrified citizens, burning buildings, and rabid infected hosts. Tommy stays behind to allow us to escape. A chase ensues between the infected and Joel carrying Sarah, until suddenly, a military patrol guns down our pursuers. Thinking they're safe, Joel and Sarah let down their guard. The soldier takes aim and fires.
Sarah! Baby! No! 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 Please! Oh, God. Please! Please! Please don't! Please!
I've played some somber games before, but I don't know if I've ever played anything this drenched in melancholy. I've spent the last few weeks shut inside my apartment. I can't go outside. I've been surviving solely on canned food. I've spent time going back to The Last of Us, piece by piece, day by day. For both my first and second playthrough, I played on Grounded Mode and Grounded Mode Plus respectively. Playing without a HUD present massively added to the immersive atmosphere of the game, so I figured it would be the best way to play it. We resume our role as Joel several years after the incident which destroyed him. Nowadays, he's a smuggler with his partner in crime, Tess. Tess has been assaulted after making a pickup and she knows the man behind the incident. In a world of ration cards, military checkpoints and no-go zones, it's immediately apparent that the world has become more harsh and prickly in our absence. Predominantly, this game has a few main tasks for the player. Go from A to B, turn on a switch, open a door, beat up some thugs, or slip past a patrol. To start with, we get the first part in spades, and if you're someone who gets put off by games with a lot of walking, this game may put you off in a big way. Though as impressive as they are somewhat hollow. You only get to observe a lot of it, without really peeking into any of the main nooks and crannies, instead being gated off by invisible walls and unpassable terrain. The first tangible obstacle we face are the generic human enemies that are encountered throughout our journey. Some carry guns, others carry melee weapons, and occasionally some of them will just run up to you and try to just punch you in the face. The start of the game allows us to try out its melee combat system, a bit of gunplay, and its most useful gameplay mechanic, its stealth gameplay. Joel can sneak around without making much noise, and if he can get behind most enemies in the game, he can choke them out for an easy kill. Just press triangle and you're done. I legitimately thought you had to hammer the button to add a bit of challenge, but no. One press does the job. This game can be played like a third-person shooter and does have a variety of guns on offer, so you can often default to action. But on Grounded Mode, there isn't nearly enough ammunition to get by, which I'll get back to later. After clearing the city's port of rival smugglers, we find the man responsible for Tess's assault. Soon after, we meet Marlene, the leader of the rebel group, the Fireflies, who has a deal to cut with Tess and Joel. Smuggle something out of the city in exchange for guns. That something turns out to be Ellie, a young girl with an immunity to the infection plaguing the human race. The infection being a fungus which invades the human body through spores, gradually transforming their victims into mutated, grotesque, clicking monsters. From now on, the story becomes not only a redemption arc for Joel as he tries his best to protect Ellie whilst coming to terms with the loss of his daughter, but also a coming-of-age story for Ellie as a child born naive in a world of killers, monsters, and suffering. And considering the harshness of the world, it's undeniably a gripping story wherein I really enjoyed immersing myself in the world, at least concerning the narrative.
No, there he is! There he is! Oh, shit. He's over there! Right there! He's over there! Oh shit! He's over there! Over there! He's over there! There he is! There he is! Oh shit! He's over there!
Playing without a heads-up display also did remove one of the game's core abilities where Joel can sense enemies through walls, but I honestly don't think it's a necessary part of the game in the first place. Playing the game cautiously, skulking around corners during stealth and scanning cover during combat for ambushes makes the game feel like it's done right. Joel has a very vague yet insightful backstory that's alluded to in the game, which dabbles with him being able to take out several armed men due to his past involvement in a raider gang of some kind. He's also resourceful, as a smuggler should be, and yet we see he also has a more tender side when we initially are introduced to him. He doesn't feel like a powerhouse, but he's definitely a cut above the typical antagonist. But other features such as the game's stingy and honestly ridiculous reduction of ammo is particularly egregious. You can choke out a group of 9 enemies all carrying shotguns, pistols and rifles, and they won't drop even a single bullet. I played the majority of the game using bottles, bricks and melee weapons simply to conserve ammo due to the fact that the game arbitrarily rations the player, even when they're doing well. It made the experience feel a bit shallow and callous in its attempts to make the game's principles of survival and scavenging tangible using trickery and unrealistic item drops. Most enemies die with only a single revolver shot to the chest, and there's no real reason to use medkits, at least on grounded mode. Clickers are a pain in the arse mainly due to the fact that in large numbers they're not worth fighting head on for no reward, and even the bloater enemies, which are a challenge, tend to only appear once or twice. You'll probably only need a few molotovs or grenades for those aforementioned bloater encounters, and although shivs are incredibly useful, they're far too rare of a commodity to utilize effectively. If you get spotted during a stealth section, the game just spawns a bunch of random enemies into the mix, which often get placed in odd positions or even get stuck sometimes. The only real boss fight in the game is a tedious stab and run affair, plus even if you die anytime in the game or in a particularly annoying area like this, there is no penalty. Aside from the stark placement of checkpoints during encounters where you can fight dozens of enemies, die, then go back to the start, this game is more of a challenge of attrition than difficulty. I even checked the documentary making of video which you can unlock from playing, which confirmed my suspicion of enemies having specific zones which even in combat they can't move from. And unfortunately I found the brief levels where you get to play as Ellie and even her DLC expansion, Left Behind, do a particularly bad job of managing resources due to the fact that your ammo reserves, weapons and supplies accrued as Joel throughout the core game aren't available. The toughest part of the game I found was when Ellie is with a weird man voiced by Nolan North in a cold lumberyard or something. And you have 2 places where the enemies storm in and have like 6 bullets to kill them with. You can hit every target dead on and still not have enough ammo. Also, Ellie has none of the upgrades Joel has, so all of those helpful upgrades you've been accruing throughout the game are pointless. I had to use Mr. NPC Man as a shield so I could stab the enemies when he was being grabbed, and then at the end they even spawn a bloater after you've exhausted all your ammo. And you know what the weird thing is? Ammo just starts miraculously appearing in every corner, out of thin air.
Realism.
Alright, that's enough being mean. The Last of Us is definitely worth a lot of praise overall. The graphics are stunning, with a great bunch of actors doing a great job at delivering their lines on character models that look realistic in a world that seems believable. It's meticulously well crafted with a nice variety of tasks breaking up the main gameplay loops of stealth and action, and I have to admit that it also served up several emotional gut punches. Though considering every bloody YouTuber created Let's Plays of this game back in the day, you better believe they also had to include images of the dead characters in the thumbnail, so some moments were spoiled for me. I wish Ellie's levels were done a lot better, not just in the vanilla game, but I also found the Left Behind DLC had a lot of filler where you just sort of dick around for giggles. There's a ton of meaty moments here, but honestly I kept thinking to myself that for all the prestige I'd witnessed from both games' media and friends of mine, I can see where they're coming from, but I just think it's a bit overzealous. It's definitely a classic, a game which single-handedly sold units for the PS3 back in its heyday, no doubt. But it's definitely got flaws. Now, even though it doesn't excel in the combat or the stealth, I think that it's more self-evident that that's not the game's intention. This is a character story, a vehicle for a game to try the difficult task which most games struggle and fail at, telling a compelling story. Joel, Ellie, even the supporting characters and obstacles presented to them are pretty amazing. Even the small talk and little moments between Joel and Ellie as they both bond are really well done. Joel's not even on paper a very likable character, and yet the way the narrative lets you peek into the moments which mold him as a person in order to eventually change your mind is particularly effective. Maybe that's why people have taken to the game so much. It has a lot of emotional clout, beautiful presentation, engaging gameplay, an unmistakable soundtrack, and a unique tone that's not yet been matched. There's a legacy to it, and I hope I've not been too harsh on this one, but I must admit, playing The Last of Us changes you.